Chris?
Any updates on Kwity Paye or Sean for this week?
Not any updates yet, no.
Right, John?
How would you assess, in general, special teams play to this point of the season, and are there any facets of it that have particularly stuck out as exceptional to you?
Yeah, there's been, I think the play's been, overall, for the season has been really good. We've gotten turnovers, we've gotten stops, kickoff coverage has been really good. Punting unit overall has been very good. Punt return, we've had our moments. I think we're hitting our stride there with the punt return unit, and same with kickoff return. And kickers and punters are off to a good start for the season.
On the far left, Larry.
Has Dylan McCaffrey been cleared to play?
Still working through the process. Yeah, progressing. Been fantastic, really. There's been, really the best I've seen of, collaboration both here at Michigan, medicine, and doctors from home in Denver, and some experts all over the country. It's been really good, but tip of the hat to the professionals.
Can you give us a doubtful, probable kind of status for him for Saturday?
No, it's in the process, in the hands of the experts.
Back left.
Kind of going back to special teams, have you decided on a kicker yet between Ornstein and Louis, or is that still what you're still working on?
Yeah, we've decided on both.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like they're both really kicking well. I think they're in a good rhythm. I think they're confident with their preparation and with the flow in game. That's the feedback from them and also from what we see.
So just split time between the two.
Yeah.
On the front left here.
Team effort.
Jim, after the game on Saturday, Shea mentioned the need to punch it in the end zone a little bit more, and you guys have. How would you assess your offense's red zone efficiency so far this season?
I think the red zone's been something that's been good for us. And as I said after the game, I think I feel like we're very close offensively and very close to hitting the stride of hitting on all cylinders. Have really good evidence to back that up, and also just what I see.
In front here.
I know that Brandon Peters' status is uncertain, but how would you assess his career at Michigan?
Really like Brandon a lot, and I think he won us ball games. Good person, good player. Been following him, and I would say the same for how he's playing there at Illinois. Good guy, good player.
Mm-hmm. On that note, how would you evaluate, your quarterback development, the prospects that you've recruited during your tenure from high school?
To go back through every quarterback that we've had?
Well, not just every. Just in general, how would you assess just how you guys have done developing quarterbacks that you recruited from high school?
I'd rather not talk about toot my own horn or don't like talking about myself that way.
Middle here, Chris.
Josh Ross, do you expect him back? And when you get him back, how does that affect the rotation inside?
I don't think he'll be back this week. When he's back, we'll assess it. Somebody comes back to play, and you see where they're at and where that stands with some of the other players that are out there.
Talk about how those two guys have fared in his absence.
Yeah, Jordan Glasgow, one of the leading tacklers in the game, really had a really good game again this past week, multiple tackles, and he was in coverage. There was one play where he was in coverage, and the next play he's making a sack. Very versatile player. Cam McGrone is also obviously an ascending player and doing quite well. Another really solid, good game for Cam McGrone. Both those linebackers are playing really well.
The NCAA obviously passed, that fair play. California with the Fair Play Act, and what's your thoughts on how it could possibly, if it continues that way, could affect the competitive balance across college football?
Yeah, you don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that you careful what you wish for. A lot of loopholes we've seen. I mean, they drive trucks through them. I can't visualize how that would be a competitive advantage, or how that would work. I've really kind of thought all the different solutions or things that you could do, and my feeling would be that college football is that's an amateur status. I think there's about 300,000 college football players, and then there's pro football. About 2,000 NFL players per year. I think the fair thing to do would be not to restrict players to have to stay in college for 3 years. They could turn pro at any point. They could be drafted after their freshman year. They could be drafted after their sophomore year. They could be drafted after their junior year, their senior year. And I would also make a rule that if they weren't drafted, they could return to college. And I think it'd also be, very productive to, if somebody were to leave after their freshman or sophomore or junior year and they hadn't finished their degree, that they would have the ability within a certain time span to come back and to finish their degree. That would be what I would suggest and propose. And you have examples of other sports. You have hockey, you have baseball, you have basketball. What do you think?
Is that something you would lead the conversation with through the Coaches Association? You have that annual meeting, I guess, in January, I guess, when.
I'd be happy to propose that. Yeah, that's something I think would be beneficial and fair to everybody. I think that when there's a restrictive nature to something, which is, you have to be a college football player for 3 years before you're eligible to be drafted. I would say the other would be better. If you're a tennis player, you'd like to be a professional tennis player at 17, you can be a professional tennis player at 17. And to give the opportunity to somebody to be a professional football player when they're 19, 20, 21. It's not a long time that there's a window to be a professional football player if somebody's good enough to do that, and then could return and finish their college degree, and probably would be appreciated more, and not taken for granted and looked at for the value that it is. I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a college education these days, plus room, board, books, and tuition. And there are some that are good enough to be professional athletes, football players, and some that aren't. But to me that would be a good resolution to the conversation that we're having.
Front left, Aaron.
Kind of going off that, do you foresee this new law in California giving those California schools a recruiting edge? I mean, they come to those kids and tell them that this is law. The other states, it's not.
I don't know. I don't know how that would work. We'd be hypotheticals, about that.
In the middle, Isaiah.
Daxton Hill, what did you see from?
It's just you don't know which way, you don't know where things would go, because there's such different rules for each sport, right? I mean, basketball, there's one and done. Hockey, they could be drafted and then return to college. Maybe a standard way of doing it would be clear and concise and good for. Then there's an amateur game and then there's a pro game.
How do you assess Daxton Hill's performance going on the defensive side of the ball, going from Rutgers to Iowa?
So he was, much more active on the defense this past game. He's moved into that #1 nickel spot. He had 6 tackles. He, showed up on the stat line and taking steps and taking strides. I think like everybody anticipated.
Well, you've long kind of said that you usually see the biggest jump from like game 1 to game 2. And since this was his first time really playing on defense against Rutgers, have you seen a similar type of jump from him at all?
Yeah, I think it's been a very good progression. I see improvement from him each week.
In the front here, Austin.
Going back to the California legislation for a minute, you brought up amateurism, and we're all aware of examples of when those rules have been broken. How pervasive do you think that is, and could you see if there were a way for players to be compensated somehow, could that curtail some of the cheating that's out there? If you could do that legally.
I mean, that's another good conversation. I've explored it, in my own mind, and wouldn't be against that. There could be a system that, like the scholarship. It's really worth upwards of $100,000 or more when you factor in, room, board, the food, the travel, the many things, and that's per scholarship, 85 players. I mean, you could have a system that cuts all scholarships in half and has, instead of 85 scholarships, there's 42 scholarships. 42 players are played a scholarship plus the $100,000. If you did that across all sports, that budget could say the same and could be financially feasible. But I think the other way would be better. There's amateur and there's pro, and there's no restriction of when somebody can take their shot at being a pro player.
You brought up loopholes. Do you feel like there's maybe a big disparity right now in how schools interpret the rules, how schools maybe utilize some of those loopholes?
Like it's been well documented. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, it seems documented, and then or voice recorded or videotaped, and then a day or two later, nobody, says anything about it. It's accepted as some kind of business as usual. And if there's one thing I think the Coaches Association could do, would be a reward system for not violating the rules. A reason for the honest guy to be able to prosper under the system.
All right, Nick.
Haven't seen any of those measures implemented.
You mentioned earlier with the conversation, you feel like the offense is close to breaking out, busting through, whatever you said. And you said there's
Catching
evidence.
stride is what it said,
Stride.
yeah.
You said you have evidence that shows you that. Is that from game or practice or both?
Yeah, both.
Interested to see in what kind of way would you say?
in all areas, run game, pass game, protection, quarterback, receiver, running backs. It's an evolving, improving group, and I've seen them, be at a really high level in practice, consistently, and a really high level in games. And getting that consistently high level in both games and practice is what I feel, what I see coming. And I think looking at the ball game, after really looking at it on tape and reviewing it, first of all, came away with the feeling that Iowa has a really good defense. One of the top, I think they're ranked second, or now maybe in the top 5 after this ball game. But really, really good. And you got to give Phil Parker and the Iowa defense and their players a lot of credit. They're a heck of a good team and a heck of a good defense. I thought we had some really good production and drives in the first half. Second half, more limited in our possessions. 2 drives in the third quarter. Both made first downs, got out to about the midfield range, and first drive of the third quarter was going good, and then we were called on a false start penalty and didn't convert on that series. Then next series, another good drive was starting, and then we tried to throw a trick play at them, and they covered it really well. We ended up losing quite a few yards on that one, and then a sack on the next play and punted it away. And then fourth quarter, again, that started with a very good drive, got into field goal range. And then the next drive in the fourth quarter also was, we had good field position, but we weren't able to convert on the 3rd and 3. And we're off the field, punted it away. And the next time we got it, we were backed up and doing our best to run the clock, low punt, and then have our defense win the game, which they did. So that was my takeaway coming away from the game.
We've talked about time on task before with offenses you've installed here in terms of it takes a couple weeks, a couple months, whatever it is, different teams, different timelines. Is that lack of, maybe you said close to being consistent, but you mentioned a lot of times where maybe it wasn't, is that due to, do you feel like that's due to the new install, or due to other things, or why it hasn't maybe been at a higher level in terms of consistency?
As I said, I think it's coming. I think it's showing, and as I said earlier, I think top defense in the country against Wisconsin, top defense, one of the top defenses in Iowa. There is a point where you actually say, good job, well played. That was a good game. Recognizing the efforts of the opponent and your own players. I feel with our team, the effort is great, off the charts. At the highest level, and when you get that, then you can get everything else.
Time for 1 or 2 more. Anthony, that was a question on the left, Ryan.
Donovan Peoples-Jones was injured early in the year, but do you still think that there's another element to his game after coming back over these last couple of weeks?
Yeah, I think he's progressing to 100%.
Is there a way to maybe utilize him a little bit more moving forward?
Yeah, we do utilize Donovan, and the question I'm answering is, so there's more to his game. I think so. I think he's progressively getting closer and closer to 100%.
Last question.
Yeah, one more about the name, image, and likeness. You say you want college football to be an amateur sport. I think the argument against it is that there's more revenue, than maybe that precedent was set. Ticket prices are higher, TV deals are more. Why do you want it to stay an amateur sport? What about that is alluring to you as a coach?
I like the fact that there's 38 sports on campus, and I always have felt that way. I like the that guys and girls, you know, can participate in athletic competition and receive college scholarship. I mean, you can talk to a Ward Manual and what the athletic budget is. I know what it was here. I know what it was when I was at Stanford, and they spend every dollar. And it's going to, you know, the non-revenue sports and the revenue sports, and you know, that model's been around for a long time. It was around, and you know, football being the sport that generates the most revenue. There was a time that basketball was shooting into Peachtree baskets, you know, and you know, it was able to come along and flourish and see what women's sports have done in the last, you know, decades. It's exciting. I got a daughter that plays water polo, you know, niece that plays lacrosse. You know, I like that there's a, you know, that opportunity is there for everybody.